You're here for the conversation for Write Down I'm an Arab with Mira Awad. Please welcome singer, songwriter, actress Mira Awad.
Good evening.
The soundtrack, the most important thing, the soundtrack is actually, there's a few copies left for sale right outside. So you'll be able to get that right afterwards of Write Down I'm an Arab, of course. Oh, Mira, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me to be here.
I have a lot of questions about this film, but we were discussing outside before. We were talking about, first of all, the fact, what's amazing about this film is that it's the story of Mahmoud Darwish, but told through a woman's eyes. Both, of course, the characters in the film, but also it's the director is Ibtisam Arana Menuchin, who's a woman, and to tell
a fierce one.
A fierce woman. Oh, she's yes, she's been here at the festival many times, and a good friend, but an outspoken woman, and one would even say a feminist. And I wouldn't say that Mahmoud Darwish struck me ever as a feminist. And from my readings of things,
it's too late to ask him now.
Yes, and what do you make of that connection being told through a woman's eyes?
Well, I think Ibtisam went through her eyes. She did a movie the way she saw the story. This movie started, became or happened because of a very little curiosity. Ibtisam really wanted to research and to get to the truth of who was that Rita, that Jewish woman behind the poem Rita and the Rifle. The song was very taken into the nationalistic interpretation. And his tune was very, it went like, أحن إلى خبز أمي وخبرة أمي ولمسة أمي أحن إلى خبز أمي وقهوة أمي. So it's very, with the oud, it's very, it's a classical Arabic style, and the composers that used to compose these poems back then used to take them from the first word until the last word the way they are. And when I came to do Ummi in that play, the scene was about Mahmoud Darwish being locked in detainment because he had broken the military military regime orders, and which ordered him not to move out of Haifa. He couldn't move around. He lived in Haifa and he was not allowed to go anywhere else but Haifa, even not to visit his parents in the village. And one day he asked for authorization to go to Jerusalem, to go to this poets panel and read poems, and they didn't allow him, but he went anyway. So he got arrested and was in jail, and his mother came to visit him. His mother brought him a thermos of coffee, of homemade coffee. So the jailer came with the coffee and told him, your mother sent you coffee, and then spilled the coffee just in front of his eyes. So that moment, as amazing as it is, that little moment broke him, like totally broke him, and then he wrote this poem. I miss my mother's coffee, I miss my mother's bread, I miss her touch. And in the movie you saw him, you heard him saying that he actually wrote it as a little boy calling for his mother. So watching that scene happening and the jailer spilling the coffee, somehow it didn't work, the lyric interpretation, and I had to scream it out. And so you got the electric guitars at the end of the movie. So it's again reacting to something new, to something not where it used to. Again, I always go to the personal interpretations of texts. I don't like slogans. I don't like big talk. Even in the political poems, I always interpret Mahmoud Darwish personally. Even when he was talking about a political situation, I believe he was talking about the political situation through his own personal eyes, and which had a very personal point of view. No one else would have written that. So
I think that's a great way to make the music more powerful and resonate even deeper. And I think in many ways you're bringing this music, his poems, to the next generation. because she really managed to modernize in many ways
I hope so.
the taking these texts and bringing them in a way that I found very engaging and relevant. I'm going to take you now in a completely different direction and talking about Mahmoud Darwish and the reaction in Israel. It's very interesting. Mahmoud Darwish is not taught in Israel in schools, even though he grew up Israeli, grew up in Israel, and of course was then sent into exile, and has a strong connection. And it's also just important to know, even if he's just the Palestinian national poet, to know a little bit about your neighbors, your cohabitors, to know what their poetry is all about. Would you have him taught in schools, and if so, why?
I think it answers itself. I think we have to teach him in schools, and I think Israelis should be taught Mahmoud Darwish, not only Arabs. Yossi Sarid, who was the education minister at some point, tried to put some of Mahmoud Darwish's poems in the curriculum when we had a left-wing government for a moment there. But as you know, we don't have it anymore, and now it's so far from being accomplished or established to add these kind of material into the curriculum. Now, Palestinian kids are not being taught Mahmoud Darwish. This is the painful thing, because okay, so they don't want to teach it to Jewish kids, to Israeli kids, fine. But Palestinian kids have to go outside school in order to discover their culture. I mean, I remember it happened to me. I did not learn anything about my father's history, about being a refugee in the history books. It says nothing about him in school. So I had to finish school and then go out of the village, because I grew up in an Arab village, go out of the village and listen to university in order to start looking back into my father's history. And I remember him not wanting to talk about it so much. And I forced him. And then I actually heard a shocking story. My father was kicked out of his house when he was 12. Like Mahmoud Darwish, he was 6 or 7 when they were kicked out of Birwe. But luckily for us, my father could come back to his village because the village was not destroyed, while Birwe, Mahmoud Darwish's village, was totally destroyed and did not exist when they came back. So they were refugees in Lebanon, Mahmoud Darwish's family, refugees in Lebanon, and then they somehow sneaked back in to find that the village and the houses don't exist anymore. So they became refugees in their own homeland. And this is what Mahmoud Darwish is all about the refugee on your own land. So it speaks the voice and not only about the Palestinian cause, but about Palestinians living in Israel right now. 1.5 million people who belong to the Palestinian nation, but live as Israelis, totally, and have went in, culturally and politically and financially are integrated in the Israeli life, but feel, and they are living on their own land, in houses of stone, but feel like refugees. So this voice of Mahmoud Darwish is bigger than,
So I want to open things, questions to the audience, but I want to ask one more, which is, when did you first encounter Darwish?
So because my father was a communist. Yes, he was. I encountered Darwish quite early. I grew up in a house that was politically involved, very much political. We used to go to all the demonstrations where Mahmoud Darwish would also be mentioned or read. He would not be there himself, but they would read out Mahmoud Darwish poems because they were speaking about the situation that we were going through. So I knew of Mahmoud Darwish, and I read Mahmoud Darwish, and I listened to the songs sung by Marcel Khalifa of Mahmoud Darwish. But I have to say that I really went into the material only 2 years ago, when I started looking into this material. I think I was intimidated. I was afraid to touch on that material because it's so iconic. There was something scary about touching it.
You did a great job.
Oh, thanks.
Let's take some questions from the audience.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, what did he pass away from?
Oh, he had heart disease, and he had, I think, 3 heart attacks. 2 he survived, and the last one, I think he even, at last they did an operation for him in Canada or something, here in the States, and he died through the operation.
Don't be shy.
Yes.
One thing that thank you. One thing that was striking to me in the film was that I'm used to seeing Palestinians portrayed as either victims or terrorists.
Yes.
And here there are people with a culture that has a universal content to it. And I'm wondering, was that a conscious intent of the filmmaker, or simply a product of the worldview that the film comes from?
Well, I think it's in my agenda and in Ibtisam's agenda and in people like us agendas to break the stereotypes, because we are categorized and stereotyped all the time in horrible stereotypes. And you can see, a sane person knows that we're not all terrorists and we're not all victims. And there are people victorious who have been doing a lot of, making successes and doing stuff, amazing things. And in Palestine, you'll find all kinds of people doing all kinds of stuff, like everywhere else on the planet. But somehow they're portrayed only as terrorists. Or all the kids are throwing stones. All the kids want to be terrorists. It's not true. So, of course, we know it's not true. And I think it's, Ibtisam does it in a natural way, because she already is breaking so many stereotypes as you know, as a person. I mean, she's married to a Jewish guy. She lives in Tel Aviv. She's broken so many stereotypes in her life. So everything she does is not stereotypical.
I'm wondering if the film has or will be screened in Israel, and specifically within the Arab communities, and also outside of Israel in Arab communities. And I also really want you to sing for us again.
Well, to your question, it's very difficult for me to answer. I mean, I wish for the movie to be screened everywhere. But you know that it does not depend on the makers of movies where the movies will be screened. It depends on so many outer you know, circumstances. So I can only hope from this stage that it gets everywhere. And people, I mean, it's less necessary in the Arab community because people know these stories. So in a way, these are stories that are worthy telling outside, and in order to break stereotypes, in order to tell you about this wonderful poet. Maybe now you'll have the passion to go and look him up and read some of his poetry, because it's worth reading, really.
But the film did win. It's screened in Israel, and it won at the Dak Aviv Film Festival the Audience Award, and which is actually, in my opinion, the best award it could have gotten. Which means that the people liked it, which is a great reaction. I will tell one anecdote, which it was screened in Israel. Yeah, it was actually on Yes Daco, and but the anecdote is that. Ibtisam applied to the Beirut Film Festival with this film, and they wrote back to her that they absolutely adored the film, and of course it speaks close to their heart, and this is a international film festival that is known for its pluralism, but of course for obvious reasons they would not be able to accept her. Which was, even though there are those obvious reasons, it was still shocking to her that someone would say that they can't accept you because you're Israeli. If she would have possibly.
Not only the movies in Hebrew, I think that also kind of alienates a lot of people.
Right. I mean, I understand the trickiness, and in Lebanon, to show an Israeli film, it's definitely something that you would need to tiptoe around. They did screen 5 broken cameras at that festival.
Oh, good.
Which, they managed to, I guess, tiptoe quietly enough.
Another one right here.
I think probably the movie is available in all the DVD stores in Beirut, pirated, or I doubt. I mean, I think so. Anyway, thank you for the music. Yatik al-afiyah. My question was, what was the reaction of, if there was, of any Palestinian or Arabic audiences to hearing Darwish speak in Hebrew? Because I actually didn't know about the interview that was done with him on Israeli television. How was it?
This was a big interview being done with him, a very famous interview. So actually, yeah, you pointed out a very interesting fact. The only time we hear Mahmoud's voice, other than when he's reading his poems, we're hearing it in Hebrew. There are letters that he wrote to his lover, I mean, read by Makram Khouri, but it's as if Mahmoud Darwish's voice, because he wrote them in Hebrew. And then this interview, that is a very long and elaborate interview, and all in Hebrew. So it's a very interesting, I think it's a very interesting take on it when we hear this grand Palestinian poet explaining himself actually in Hebrew. So I don't know of reactions of people, how they felt about hearing Mahmoud in Hebrew, but I think it's a fascinating fact.
I think it's a huge statement. I mean, it's a dramatic statement saying, I speak your language.
Yes, I know your language, and I know it well. You know, I think sometimes I feel like that in Israel. I don't want to boast, but I speak better Hebrew than the average Israeli. And this is for a reason. I want to know the language. I want to speak it well. I want to be verbal in it. I want to be able to express myself and not be stuck in the, in words, and so that I can voice myself. And this is important.
And in the film itself, the fact that those letters are so, I mean, for those of you who don't follow the Hebrew, the eloquence in the Hebrew in those letters, I mean, it's the level of poetry that I'm sure his Arabic is in, and it cannot even be translated how beautiful he was able to express himself.
Hi, first of all, I'd like to say that you're an amazing musician. I also heard you on Saturday.
Oh, thank you.
And it's a great movie. I, as an Israeli, was wondering, I think that this movie, unfortunately, probably is screened or shown to the audience that are, it's like preaching to the choir a bit. Probably the more liberal, left-wing type of people come to this movie in Israel. And I was wondering in what way you as an artist and as an educator also help bring this narrative, or bring this movie, or bring with your music to those that probably live in the periphery and are less accessible, or less, let's say, would less be aware of how to actually come to terms or to understand this complexity.
When you're talking about this, when you're talking about people not understanding complexity, you mean who? Exactly.
No, I meant like the periphery, the more conservative. I meant like in what way is your music?
Beyond the choir?
It's difficult. It's always difficult to preach beyond the choir. I mean, because the choir is the ones who are there, and the others don't want to listen. Sometimes they do. I mean, I consider myself a person who managed to penetrate the Israeli mainstream and managed to say difficult things in a way that people could listen. Because I don't come with hate. I think I don't come with any hate. I don't come with any violence, and I explain myself very well. And sometimes I feel that I could get through. Now, having said that, there are times that I feel that all I've done in all my career, and it has been an agenda of mine to break the stereotypes and to open these little windows between the communities, the Arab community and the Israeli community in Israel and Palestine. And then we get a summer like we just had. And then we get what is happening right now in Israel, and I just stand, helpless and just thinking, okay, what do we do now? What do I do now? What do I do? How do I tell people not to go out to the street and hit someone? How do I tell people not to generalize? How do I tell them when they're so pumped up with so much anger and stereotypes and hate, and I feel helpless in front of it. I really don't have the tools. So in these times, I'm like, okay, I try to say what I have through Facebook, through a website, through my music, through this movie, through everything that I, as an artist, can do, because that's what I am. I'm an artist. I don't have power beyond that. But it's up to people to listen. And I can make them listen. I wish I could. I wish I could shoot everyone with a bullet of compassion.
I think your music, by the way, manages to sometimes reach beyond your choir.
I hope this would be my dream coming true.
There's
if
a universal
I do
language.
one thing, if I change one opinion, one thing, it would be my dream coming true.
We're going to take 2 last questions.
So thank you so much. As I was watching the movie, I was thinking that Mahmoud Darwish was in kind of involuntary exile, and artists like Said Kashua today in voluntary exile.
Yeah.
And you and Ibtisam Marana must think about people like him and Tim, I assume, in particular. Can you talk about that? Like what's going on among you guys vis-a-vis these choices?
This is a painful, subject because to stick around and to try to make a difference is one hell of a hard job. It's not easy, and it's not becoming any easier. And for people like Ibtisam or Sayyid or whoever it is, it's becoming even more difficult. And yeah, I admit it. I sometimes, every day almost, have that thought of why you're doing this? Just go somewhere and live a life. Live a normal life. Just wake up in the morning, make you some coffee, go and teach somewhere, play some music, go back home, be with your husband. And fun, it's great. That peace and quiet is like a big longing. But then I find myself not leaving. And then I find myself still fighting to keep some hope. You know what? Nobody's going to sell me that lie that the Israeli-Palestinian dispute is unsolvable. It's a huge lie. Come on. I mean, look at Europe. Jewish DJs are working in Berlin right now, 60 years after the Shoah, after the Holocaust. Come on, don't sell me that lie that it's unsolvable and that we cannot make some kind of a deal of, okay, you there, he, whatever. We don't have to love each other. Really not. I don't love all my neighbors, but I don't shoot them. Sorry?
Just a comment and then a question. Isaac, to your point, I thought it was the most romantic movie. Those letters were so romantic, and I was not expecting that in this movie. I also feel that there is no better tool to go beyond that choir than film. It's so effective. And I'm just wondering, maybe this is a very naive question, but is there any attempt to use these films or take these films, like to Washington, to people who make policy and in some way get them to view it?
Again, if I could hold them all hostage in a screening room and screen this movie to them, I would do it. But, ask Isaac. I mean, this industry is, you make art, you make something, and you send it out, and you do everything in your power for it to reach wherever it can. Other than that, control is not so...
Well, actually, I'm going to put the responsibility on everybody in this room. It's actually the audiences that manage to start a buzz about a film. And you spreading the word in every way, coming to more films here at Other Israel, coming to hear Mira Awad's music, let the message be spread as widely as possible. And,
see other Ibtisam movies. Ibtisam Marana has done a lot of movies, and they're all great. So
and we have them on our streaming site. Wow, the plugs
see?
are just going left and right
over.
here.
We're good together. We should do this often.
Yes, the CDs are for sale outside.
Yeah, exactly,
by the way.
and their website is.
Thank you so much.
Thank
this
you,
has been
thank you,
a
thank you for
conversation.
coming.
Please continue talking about these things. Next up downstairs is Invisibles, a fabulous film about the Bedouin community in Israel, a feature film. And we have, of course, 3 more days of the festival, so please join us and bring your friends. Thank you. Mira has to run for another conversation down at Cinema Village. Her CDs are for sale outside, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.